I saw we've got a lot of Apple TV news this week.
Yeah, not just Apple, but actually other places as well have been putting out like their spring slates or
Mm,
2024 slates that only go through the spring.
yeah,
Um,
the sizzle
uh,
reel.
yeah, and so there's been really quite a lot going on here in the past week or so. Probably I'll try to put something together for the site going beyond what we're going to talk about here, even with other networks. But I know that there are a few Apple shows that we're waiting on, I'm waiting on, you're waiting on, both of us are waiting on. So to focus on that, one might note that, oh, you're looking at the Apple slate and Severance isn't on there.
Yeah,
Um, but I did see on Twitter indications that it is back in production, so we've got that going for us at least.
yeah. So this is what it must have been 2 months ago now that they did this cryptic photo of Adam Scott on the account. Everyone thought that something was coming. That I guess that meant the kickoff of production, maybe. But yeah, it's going to be a year maybe before we see this.
Maybe it'll be by the end of the year. It's still earlier in the year. It's I don't know. I don't have the expertise to know even for sure how long it takes. They have to go to film and then there's post production and so on. But obviously with television, sometimes they do turn things around rather quickly. So I don't know. But there was a little bit more than that. There was the first cryptic tweet from Apple that I think we talked about briefly on here. Then there was another one maybe 10, 12 days ago, and Ben Stiller retweeted it with back to work. So that I take that as confirmation. I think that
Yeah,
is
and
confirmation that they're back to
I
work.
believe Apple TV follows the model of they might release a couple to start, but then they go mostly week to week. So it's not like we have to do a whole season before we can start pumping these things out.
Yeah, they might be on, might indeed. Sometimes you see that with the post-production schedule where things aren't completely done,
Yeah.
but it starts airing. I mean, historically, I think that's really common. Unfortunately, on the flip side, I'm reading that Foundation, which is also not on the slate, apparently season three production has been delayed for vaguely stated reasons. Have you had the chance to check the show out yet? I know we've talked about
I
it
haven't
some.
checked the show out. I read this piece you sent over. It says basically they asked everybody to show up and then send everybody back home again.
Not good news.
No.
And it's like vague. I think it's production in Prague, and I'm gathering that has something to do with the budget and the rules and regulations in Prague having maybe changed a little bit, or I don't know exactly. Again, it's very vaguely stated as to why, but long and short, they were saying, "Hey, we're going to start. Everyone show up to Prague, and then you can go home. We'll let you
Yeah.
know." Yeah, it's worrisome. I think Foundation, particularly the second season, I thought was really entertaining. And I'm looking forward to season three whenever that might be. But all of these things were like I think Foundation had also gotten going on season three, and then the strikes happened. That happened to Severance. That also happened to Silo.
Yeah.
Here I am going, hey, Apple released their slate. Let's talk about things that aren't on it.
And it's a whole bunch of things that never showed before. Well, there's a couple of good things I'd like to point out, but yeah, at least
Oh
for
yeah,
Silo and Severance, seems like production is ongoing, whereas Foundation said that press
I don't
pause.
know. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Foundation. Silo, I was just seeing this appears to be really kind of recent, maybe semi-unofficial news. If you look at the website, that's my source here. Rebecca Ferguson said something, and then that they're supposed to wrap in early March, like March 8th. So if they're wrapping filming, then they have to do post-production and so on. But I would expect if that's accurate, we probably would get season two by the end of the year.
I think that that timeline works, that if you're finishing filming by March 8th, you need, let's just, even if you give them 6 months of post-production, we could get this in the fall. And I guess it makes sense that they, something that's promoting some new series and some returning series, they're not going to want to spoil any news or show any footage they're not ready to show. So that's why we didn't get any firm news about Silo. But this one would not surprise me if we see it in 2024.
Yeah. And we might get Severance too. I mean, I do get the feeling looking at what they have on that list that this is stuff that's done or nearly done, or they're
Yeah.
just eminently confident. Most of the things have release dates, even on this article, and a couple of them don't, but they're saying, well, it'll be later this year. We'll definitely have this.
Yeah.
Um, Other things that stood out to you on that list you mentioned?
Yeah. So I don't know if this has come up before. Did you catch the first season of Loot
I did
on Apple
not.
TV?
I did
So this
not.
is speaking of Adam Scott, so this is Maya Rudolph
Hmm.
stars in this. It is by at least one, maybe two of the writers of Parks and Rec. And Maya Rudolph is married or was married to a just complete jerk billionaire, Adam Scott. And something happens, they're not together anymore, and it's really funny. So she
Okay.
sort of decides to recommit her life to philanthropy and working at a nonprofit and sort of not be just sort of I'm just a pretty face person anymore. And it was just quite charming and funny. And I'm really glad a second season is coming back. This was a good show. I think that really was kind of under the radar. I never saw it really much of anywhere. Just happened
Yeah.
to pick it out because I was listening to the podcast of one of the Parks and Rec writers who was the writer on this show, and just good to see this coming back. That's something I definitely recommend checking out.
Cool. Yeah, I should check it out. I mean, cards on the table. One of the things that happens to me is I'll be looking at this stuff and I'll be thinking about what feels like a fit for TV obsessive to write on and things like that. And sometimes I miss things. It's also, in my experience, I find it hard to write on comedy. I don't know if
Yeah,
you had much
yeah,
experience with this. Um, but a half hour comedy, like, oh, you don't want to just write an article and say, by the way, it's funny.
it's funny. Yeah,
I read on one season of Barry, and I felt like I kept having to do that. I'd be recapping Barry, and like the action of Barry's very dark,
yes,
largely. Every once in a while, I would have to say, just a reminder, this show's hilarious.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'll check out Loot. What else caught your eye in the news this week?
What about this is getting a little bit of play out there on the discourse. This new show Sugar that's coming out,
Yeah,
starring Colin Farrell, right, as a private investigator, I want to say.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one did catch my eye, primarily for the Colin Farrell of it all. And
that one, and then it looks like we're going to go have some sort of there's a show that they're producing called Manhunt, which I guess will be a sort of an
uh
anthology, and they're going to start with a manhunt of John Wilkes Booth in its first
I
season.
wonder if they'll get into. Do you know that this story that apparently, or not apparently, because it might not be true, there's like an urban legend that there is a train car buried somewhere under Manhattan or New York City that is completely closed off that would have John Wilkes Booth's diary in it. You ever hear about
I've never heard of this story.
that? This is great. I mean, I'll try to look up the article. Like, however many years ago, it was like a long read, but the article was really about this guy who was like devoted his life to trying to find this thing. And so I guess it is still a question whether it even exists, you know.
Yeah.
But you do have this guy who's decades, talking to the city, trying to get permission to like dig a hole and stuff like this. Um, I don't know. I hope somehow that's in the show. I
Yeah,
guess.
that'd be great. Yeah, we could see if this their take on that. But yeah, looks they're going to go back and do it's like a 6 or 8 episode season on the I guess it was a couple of days they were hunting John Wilkes Booth. I don't have my history down,
Something like
but
that.
looks dramatic. Looks pretty dramatic.
Didn't he like get hurt and then,
Yeah, he broke his leg jumping out of
yeah,
the gallery that Lincoln was sitting in, and then they still couldn't find him for a couple of days.
hiding out somewhere. No, I mean, actually, we're talking about Apple Slate, focusing on that. A lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah,
I'm kind of curious about the show, the new look that comes out next week, largely just because of the cast,
yeah.
like, am I really into the idea of watching a show about Christian Dior? Yeah, I don't know. But like John Malkovich is in it, and like, well, just a whole slew, Ben Mendelsohn, like a whole slew of just names that pop out to me that make me think like maybe I have to check the show out just because the acting is bound to be really good.
Yeah, they do have. We've talked about this before, but the they are really trying to diversify pretty extensively what their content library. We know they have strong sci-fi, so they're really into getting into comedy, into drama, into thrillers, into anthologies, into docu-series. There's something about the New England Patriots on here, right? So
hmm
it's just everything that you can think of.
Yeah, and then some kid shows and stuff too. They
Yep.
sprinkled in there, and yeah, science fiction, Constellation coming up in a couple weeks. I'm planning to write on that for the site. Um, Hopefully, it is good.
Yeah.
Premise looks quite interesting. Nuclear base comes back to Earth from outer space, and like things are wrong. Like I guess
Yes.
that's the brief tagline.
I will say the trailer to that show looks quite interesting. It's
Yeah, it
supposed
looks
to be
pretty gripping.